Have you ever noticed how easy it is to live from the neck up? We spend so much time thinking, analyzing, planning, and trying to make sense of our lives that we can lose touch with the very place where so much of our experience actually lives, in our bodies. Today's conversation explores what happens when we begin to reconnect. My guest, Crystal Clear, is a somatic bodywork practitioner whose work blends nervous system regulation, trauma informed touch, yoga, and Tantra. Before you make any assumptions about that last word, I encourage you to stay curious. As you'll hear, Tantra is far more expansive than the way it's often portrayed. And this conversation is much less about sexuality than it is about presence, safety, and learning to listen to the wisdom of the body. What I appreciate most about talking with Crystal was her belief that healing doesn't begin by trying to fix ourselves. It begins when we feel safe enough to become honest with ourselves, to notice the patterns we've carried, the ways we've learned to protect ourselves, and the possibility that our bodies have been trying to guide us all along. Whether you're interested in nervous system healing, somatic practices, or simply curious about what it means to feel more at home in your own body, I think you'll find something meaningful in this conversation. So settle in, stay curious, and enjoy my conversation with Crystal Clear. Welcome to the Spiritually Curious Therapist, where science, spirit, and the self come together in the art of healing. I'm Jody Silverman, psychotherapist, Reiki master, and fellow seeker. Here we explore how presence, compassion, and nervous system wisdom helps us reconnect with the heart, the body, and the soul. Hello and welcome back to the Spiritually Curious Therapist. Today we have with us a very special guest, Crystal Clear. Crystal is a professionally trained massage therapist, registered yoga teacher, RYT 200 Yoga Alliance, and somatic bodywork practitioner with many years of experience working at the intersection of Tantra-informed touch, nervous system regulation, and embodied healing. She is currently deepening her clinical training through relational life therapy with Terry Real, the certificate in somatic sexology at the Pacific Center for Somatic Sexology, and emotional release therapy certification with Pat Jackman. Crystal is the founder of Sensora Sanctuary, a curated somatic bodywork collective serving clients in Los Angeles and Orange County. Her work is rooted in her own healing journey and shaped by decades of hatha yoga practice, somatic study, and a deep commitment to creating spaces where people feel safe enough to truly let go, which I can attest to given the conversation Crystal and I were having right before I hit record. I'm so excited to continue with that conversation. Welcome, Crystal.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. So we'll start like I always do. Let's start with you telling us a little bit about who you are and how you got to do the work that you're currently doing.
Got it. I would say that first and foremost, I am a lifelong learner and a student of the same teachings that I'm bringing to my practice. There's not a hierarchy. It's definitely an eye to eye thing from heart and mind to another. And besides all of my professional certifications, I think that the deeper drive to this type of work was really that I grew up in a home where it was not safe to feel anything. And so I learned very early nervous system adaptations in specifically learning to perform and endure and make myself small in order to survive. This is a pervasive pattern that I'm seeing across the board with almost all my clients as well, and it expresses itself differently. So, as a result of that, by the time that I was in my early 20s, I carried those nervous system adaptations and that training in making myself very small straight into an abusive relationship. And when I finally left, I did not feel brave at all. I felt exhausted. And very shortly after that, I found my yoga practice. I had done yoga before, but I found the right teacher.
Mm.
And I stayed with her for a decade, and it was Bikram hot yoga. And I performed yoga for longer than that, even without understanding what I was practicing.
Can I pause you there for a second? What does that tell us more about what that means? You performed yoga.
So I remember a lot of crying when I first
Mhm.
got into the practice. And for anyone listening that doesn't know much about Bikram, it is hot yoga. It's done typically in a room that's 105 degrees when the class starts, but then you pack a bunch of bodies in there and it can get significantly hotter. And there's a standing series followed by a floor series, and it's really strenuous. So I had a lot of classes where I pushed myself to what I didn't know the capacity of my nervous system. I didn't understand the edges. I thought that pushing meant and endurance meant proof of worth and success. I had my nervous system running on high alert for so long that it was just the default mechanism. And I didn't know how to be in my body without the performance. And so we get to the end of the class to Savasana, and that stillness, I'd have a trope running. I have to be doing something. I got all this stuff to do today, and my mind would be going fast. There was other classes where I would fall asleep on the floor, but it was hard to just lay there and just be. And I like the term me search instead of research. The walls of my consciousness became the laboratory where I have done my life's most important work. And my own healing has very much become the curriculum over many years of honest self-examination. Not always easy or fun, but understanding the connection between my mind, my body, and my nervous system and the patterns that I was carrying eventually did become the foundation of my current professional work.
At what point did you realize that something needed to change?
Right away, when I was a small child, it was just how to do it that took over.
Ah,
So
okay.
I do think that most people recognize that something's not right. And once you're done gaslighting yourself and pretending that it's normal,
Mhm.
most people think, I'll just go to a talk therapist. And in my case, I've actually been in talk therapy since I was 4 years old. So that's 40 years of talk therapy. And I want to say that that is deeply sacred work to be witnessed by another human being. But over the years with my training, I've found that I can identify an animal by its tracks in the snow. So I don't necessarily need to know somebody's entire life story in order to see how the nervous system has adapted to suppress certain things. And so that pattern recognition came over the course of thousands of clients. And I'm constantly researching every day of my life to become better at what I do. And I treat my sessions as a classroom and also my own body and understanding what I call emotional literacy. So, our emotions not being the decision maker, but being data to take into consideration while learning how to get grounded and where certain emotions are somatically landing in the body so that when these emotions are coming up, we have a pretty good insight as to what it is based on where it's hitting the body. And this takes tracking ourselves over time. And it's something that I teach my clients how to do to navigate their emotional terrain and interoception.
Which I think is so important. I want to come back to that because I think that that's a big part of our conversation. And just if we could just rewind for a moment, because you said something really important. You said that you had been in therapy since you were 4 years old. Was there something that happened that brought you to that experience? Because that's pretty young to start therapy.
Yeah, without a clinical diagnosis, because the narcissist most likely is not going to go to therapy because it's everybody else's fault. Both of my parents were abusive and on a have high spectrum narcissistic
Mm.
behavior. And my nervous system, actually, let's go back a little bit. When I was born, I had a tumor the size of a grapefruit in my stomach. And back in the 1980s, doctors had limited information on how infants deal with pain. And so they actually performed an open cavity surgery without any painkillers while I was awake.
Goodness.
So this, I believe, I can't prove the psychological after effects, but I we know from trauma informed studies that medical trauma like that as an infant deeply affects the nervous system. And
Absolutely.
I think I was hypersensitive to the misattunement and the anger and the silent treatments going on in the house. And so I started to express the discomfort. And so I was the one placed in therapy. And I'm actually really grateful for that because 40 years of talk therapy and I've learned a lot. And I think at certain points, talk therapy kept me alive. So I'm never going to say that talk therapy doesn't have its place. It's very complementary to what I currently do today. What I'm doing just takes it a step further because now we're not intellectualizing the traumas. We're going to where they're being held in the body through many years of bracing and holding our breath. And I think a lot of people maybe feel like something is wrong with them when in fact their nervous systems adapted in a hyper intelligent way so that they could survive these situations just as mine did.
Absolutely. And I imagine that having had that experience, even though you may not have been aware of it at some point, just helped you to be more attuned to the suffering that is happening in other people in this subconscious way, because that experience as an infant lived in your brain and your nervous system, even if you weren't aware of it.
Yeah, I agree. And
Yeah.
it's likely compacted by many years of a completely misattuned environment afterwards. And so I think that my system was always seeking safety. That safety is never going to come from outside of us. We have to learn how to create that within ourselves. And it's like going into the internal battlefield that is our wounds can be deeply frightening to people when they don't know how to navigate it. But as a result of doing my own shadow work and inner work, and I mean shadow by facing the parts of ourself that we're not aware of, right? Because
Yeah.
by bringing awareness into, let's say we have the core wound, all of us have some sort of core wound, and that could be something catastrophic that happened, like in my case. But for a lot of people, it's what didn't happen. It's the care that they didn't get, and they never felt like they were safe in the world. And that turns into adaptive strategies to survive. And then what happens as we get older is we have any sort of stimulus happens and the nervous system automatically wants to default to what it knows. And then we repeat the same patterns of behavior, which very much become walls that keep people out. And then we really don't feel safe. And similar situations, people's traumas keep looping. So learning how to really tune into the feelings in your body and not being afraid of them gives you the type of literacy to change those patterns on a core structural level. And that doesn't always have to be done through painful circumstances. Sometimes joy can be the teacher, pleasure can be the teacher, rest can be the teacher.
Yeah. It's the awareness that makes the difference, right? And the intention, which is what I talk to a lot of people about. It's like having the experience is one thing, but if we are not intentionally bringing it into our nervous system, sometimes it loses its impact on us and just becomes an experience that sits on the shelf. And so you've had a lot of those experiences throughout your life and now produce those experiences for folks who come to you for healing. And I know we talked a lot about all of the different ways in which you do that. And one of the things I wanted to ask you about is the word Tantra because as we were talking about before we jumped on, a lot of people hear that and have all sorts of ideas around what that means. So can you talk a little bit about, from your perspective and the work that you do, what does Tantra mean? And also just a little bit about your industry in terms of maybe what people need to be careful about.
Yes, that's a big layered question. So I'm
Yes,
going
it
to
is. I'm sorry. I tend to do that. I ask layered questions. So start with part one.
let me start. I'm going to try to do this in order. Let's start with what is Tantra? Tantra has ancient roots. And I also want to say my training is in white classical Tantra. My training is actually not in Neo Tantra. And Tantra yoga, tan means to expand, and tra means tool, and yoga means union. So Tantra is yoga. And the purpose of yoga is not to twist yourself into a pretzel, although that is a great way to make yourself present, because if you are in a very deep back bend, you're definitely not stressing out about your deadline for work next week. That'll get you really present really quickly. But there's a there's several different types of yoga. Some yoga is meditation based, some is philosophical, and predominantly what we're seeing in this country is hatha yoga, which is more physical. So postures, breath work, mudras, symbols with the hands, yantras, visual symbols, chanting. And these are all tools that are designed to make the consciousness fully present. And this is a really rich subject. And so even when you look at, take something like dialectical behavioral therapy or cognitive behavioral therapy, these are stemming out of Buddhist mindfulness practices. And Tantra was very alive in both India and Tibet. So this is where Tantric Buddhism stems from. And even Carl Jung had a huge overlap with Tantra. So when we're looking at non-dualistic Tantra, we're talking about how there is no darkness without light, there's no joy without pain. And it's really about how much can you hold? How much space can you hold? Can you hold the space for your own pain the way that you have space for your own joy, right? Because I think culturally we're muted for connection, social acceptance, opportunities, and accessing the true self in a paradigm like this can be really difficult and leave people feeling other. So Tantra includes movement and breath work and spiritual text, but I have a lot of clients who have no spirituality whatsoever, and they still are able to work with it, because learning to be present doesn't require you to define your relationship to any sort of God or religion. But in America, I think Tantra is highly sexualized, and this is where it gets muddy. It's not to say that Tantra doesn't include sexuality. It's just that is one small slice of a much larger equation. And I think that because there is no governing body really for the Tantra industry, and there's no barrier to entry, that anyone can pop up and label something like a sensual massage a Tantra practice when they're fundamentally very different. And especially, I'm trying to remember, you asked me how somatics play into this. So Tantra would not, we're not trying to intellectualize our issues, because the answers to all of the issues in the mind are in the body. This is the portal to the deepest spiritual understanding that we have, and the highest level of consciousness is actually to feel safe enough to go into our body, because at the core, when we're not in touch with our bodily sensations, then we're not in touch with our intuition. And when we're not in touch with our intuition, we don't have access to our own truth. So they're all deeply interconnected, and there is no one without the other.
Can we
Find
pause on, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you. Can we pause on that for a moment? Because I think that's really important. And it's something that I just keep coming back around to over and over again in all of the interviews that I have been doing, especially recently, in terms of the importance of embodiment in a spiritual practice. Because so often when people lean into a spiritual practice, especially in the metaphysical and new age world, it's all about what's up here and out there, opposed to coming in through the body. Was there a time and a place where you really realized that?
Absolutely. I've had the privilege to sit in over 2 decades worth of ayahuasca ceremonies and other medicine ceremonies. And I have definitely experienced, not just in the medicine world, but also in the therapeutic realms, lots of practitioners that are not safe. And your body knows that, even if you don't have the vocabulary to call it out. And so I think that when we are talking about embodiment, you can have all the certifications in the world and still not be able to hold a space safe enough for somebody to actually go into themselves. So I tell my clients, I'm not here to solve your problems because you're the master of your own life and you have those answers. I just know how to get you there. And so it's like, I've got an internal, I'm like, oh, you're in hell? Not all of them are. Some people just come for relaxation, but some people are going through some really serious life stuff. And I just tell them, I got a granola bar and a coconut water. Take my hand. I'll lead you out of this place. And I help them to find their own answers. And so embodiment is not about intellectualizing the answers. It's about, like I said, the core structural change of like, I read my intuition, I read the sensations in my body, I take a look at that data from a grounded place, and now I'm responding differently. And I think at the forefront of everything I do, that I am obsessed with accuracy and accuracy in the appropriate response to a stimulus, whatever that may be, and helping others to also recognize the loop and how to shift it. And I teach a lot of things about accountability, repair, healthy conflict, self abandonment. I think this is also something I run into with almost everybody. And self abandonment can really masquerade itself as being the bigger person or explaining yourself for the 10,000th time or not being judgmental. And so it can really masquerade itself as love. And then it leaves us drained. So sending down sort of a awareness taproot to feel out the parameters of what is my nervous system capacity. Am I getting maxed out by this person, the situation? Learning those edges and then protecting yourself within them so that you really can show up with the right boundaries in place to protect yourself.
What does that typically feel like for you in a session when you're working with somebody who starts to feel into and find those edges? Because that's really the work, right? It's for people to get to a point where they realize, oh, here's where I end and you begin, is huge because we're so used to just existing without really understanding or knowing that.
This shows up in a variety of ways. I have certain people who will sit down with me because I'm working, and I've said this to you earlier, but I'm working with men, women, couples of every race and nationality and sexual orientation, lots of neurodivergent and autistic adults. And I have some people who sit down and within 5 minutes, they're telling me about every trauma that's ever happened in their life. There's also the people that sit down and say, everything's good. I'm just here to get body work. And either way, there's a lot of work to be done there. And I think that the first session anyone ever sits down with me in is about my earning their trust through the quality of presence and attunement that I hold within the container. And I can often watch somebody soften in real time, and not as a sales pitch, but more my understanding of straight up physiology. It takes about 90 minutes in a session for somebody's nervous system to actually fully arrive.
Yeah.
And so sometimes in the beginning of the session during the conversation piece, I'm always directly facing my clients and we're sitting on the same couch. I'm not across the room from them. And a lot of times I'll just put my hands out like this because when they're holding my hands, it's not to be corny, but that is heart chakra, your
Yeah.
hands. Your hands do the work of the heart. And so when I'm in life, most people, nobody will hold their hands unless it's your mommy or your partner. And so
Mhm.
they're not used to even making skin contact like that. And so when they're holding my hands, I sometimes notice people will have their arms stiff like this, holding them straight out because their shoulders are tight. Give them a little shake and be like, hey, do you notice you're not breathing or you're not, your shoulders are all tense, and they realize what they're doing because it's unconscious. They're not even aware that they're bracing, but that kind of bracing is happening all the time with most people. And then we wonder why our shoulders are jacked up or our lower backs hurt. And so that's where the psychoneuroimmunological lens comes from, that when you understand how your psychology affects your nervous system and then how the nervous system is affecting your immune system and every major organ of your body, now we're talking about what yoga is known for thousands of years.
Which is the union of all.
It's all interconnected, it's inseparable.
Yeah.
And taking some, often the sensations that we're feeling in our body are so extreme that people will find any way not to deal with it. And this is what I believe we're seeing at the root of all addiction patterns: drugs, alcohol, sex, gambling. It's a running from the intensity of the feelings. And being able to have somebody safely bring you into your body to meet those things is not small. It's the entire work itself.
Absolutely. And I would say chronic pain and symptoms as well are being expressed in lieu of people being able to fully feel, especially the most difficult feelings. So tell us a little bit more about that, because we were talking about that before we jumped on too, in terms of the importance of being able to grow your capacity to experience the sensation of all feelings, good and bad. Or I don't even want to say good or bad. I want to say the more difficult ones versus the more pleasant ones.
And that's, I really tread lightly about around using the word difficult with my clients, because the truth of the matter is that this is my life's passion. I will be doing this till the day I die. And I love my clients before I even meet them, because I feel deeply honored when somebody trusts me with their nervous system in a space like this. And it may be difficult for them, but like I said in the beginning, this is my ability to hold an attuned space is about how deeply I have met myself. And so the work isn't the work, I'm the work. I have the whole trope about how the body heals itself is not accurate in a container like this. I actually have a direct responsibility to the container, and the way that I hold it makes all the difference. And the most important thing when somebody's coming in is actually the connection that we have to one another, because that's going to determine how deep they can go. So when they are facing a very difficult emotion, there is a time to be quiet. There's a time to crack a joke. There is a time to attune with physical touch. And knowing the line for each of those things has been my biggest work, because you can crack a joke to divert from an uncomfortable feeling, and then you're not allowing the person to complete the emotion. And that's literally the path to healing, is when they know that it's safe to cry, it's safe to be angry, it's safe to feel despondent. I even have clients who have had suicide attempts and have come to me very shortly after. So I'm dealing with very real people. And then there's plenty of clients, like I said, that just come in for what they would think is a pleasurable massage. And then they're met with something much deeper. And it's an opening and an unannounced opportunity for them to feel. Because if you're able to feel pain and not emotionally collapse under the weight of it into depression, but stay grounded, and you're able to feel intense amount of joy without romanticizing it or turning it into addictive pattern, this is where we expand our capacity. Okay, now I'm feeling this emotion, but what do I do with this? And we teach all these things in schools except for emotional literacy. So everybody's left on their own to hold these very rich internal worlds that need to be met the same way that we need water and air. And I think ultimately at the core, my practice has been somewhat of an anthropological deep dive into human sexuality and consciousness. And what I see is a loneliness epidemic. And this is even in people who are partnered and married with kids. Because if your truth and your inner world are not being met in a safe space, then you will feel alone. And even if somebody gets one person in life to tune into them in that way, it is the medicine.
Yeah, I was recently talking to somebody about the difference between being alone and being lonely, and how you can be alone and not feel lonely. And you can also be around a lot of people and partnered and have a lot of friends and feel very lonely. And I think you're absolutely right in terms of the loneliness epidemic. And all of us trying to find a way to connect, especially in this new age of social media and technology, which in some ways bridges us and in some ways also pushes us apart. So I'm curious about all of this in terms of your journey as you continue to learn and build and work with your clients around all of these different layers, which is so beautiful and amazing. You had mentioned that you grew up in a home, obviously abusive, not a lot of attunement. How did you start to understand the need to connect with emotions, and what was that process like for you?
I am a firm believer at this point that the damage to my nervous system through that surgery made my nervous system hypersensitive. So I don't feel like I really had a choice on whether or not I was going to feel my feelings. They were happening and they were happening big time.
Ah,
And
okay.
it took me a lot of years to also recognize that I am on the autism spectrum, and most adult females who are autistic are undiagnosed. And then even if you do get diagnosed, there's not a lot of help, right?
Mhm.
I don't consider this a disability or something that feels like a limitation to me. If anything, I feel like it's a magic wand that I've learned how to work with, and it comes with exceptional pattern recognition and attunement. And so when I'm working with people, I noticed micro shifts in tone, in breathing, eye movement, how the way that they're holding their hands, every little thing. And so for people with sensitive nervous systems, when they come into a new environment, there is often a lot of things that can be deeply dysregulating to them. And so even the texture of the lighting and the environment and scents and fabrics and arrangement of things in the room, I'm very carefully curating for it to be a safe space for people to walk into. And navigating, I think, the sensitivity to my own emotions was through not through altruism and or because I'm kind or because I want to help people. It was through necessity.
Yeah.
And now that I have, I think, a pretty firm grip on the way that I operate and being able to hold space for my own very intense emotions, it's almost like when I am holding that space for another person, it never feels draining for me. I never walk out of sessions feeling drained. I feel like the interactions in the sessions are so honest, and whether or not there's laughing or crying or somebody just gets finally relaxed enough to snore while they're getting a massage, it's like whatever the expression is, it feels nourishing to me because there is that co-regulation of nervous systems happening when a person finally lets go. I'm feeling that with them. And it's a really beautiful thing. And it's what keeps me coming back to my own practice. It's a classroom for me to learn and get better and better. And this is very much where the emotional release therapy training comes in, because that the most profound healing work I've ever witnessed in my life by a long shot. And that is all about allowing people to finally really express what they've been suppressing their whole life. Much if you shook up a Coke bottle and popped the cork off, it explodes. And being able to bear witness to that without it rocking your system is a learned skill on my part. And one that I actually deeply enjoy because I enjoy the honesty that comes from the ability to express in this way when it's been held in forever. It's like they're finally getting honest about what's in there.
Yeah. Yeah. And releasing that energy that's been stuck in the nervous system for so long.
Yeah.
So we're starting to wrap up here. I have just a couple more questions. One is, can you tell us about your name?
Crystal clear.
Crystal clear.
Legal name, that is the name that I used for this practice. And I think that there was a point in my own personal work where I think it's frustrating for anybody to sit through years of talk therapy and be repeating patterns. But I think I reached a point of clarity and I understood that the real path of healing can't be done in solitude. It's not about going up on a mountain and renouncing all worldly pleasures and just being a monk in the outback. It's done relationally. It's done relationally with other human beings, and being able to behave and react cleanly in relation to other human beings is difficult. It is a skill. And I think that I, at a certain point, was like, ooh, I feel very clear. And coming from a lifetime of feeling very confused about whether or not I could rise to meet myself in certain ways, and if life could be filled with a sort of ease and grace, even when there's very real issues happening. I got to that part and I felt okay that if I take this name on, then that means when somebody steps into session with me or into my field, that my clarity becomes the optimal environment for their own transformational work. And so I didn't take that name on lightly. I was like, oof, I just really assigned myself a task. But that's why I said earlier that I'm most concerned with accuracy. I'm going to continue doing research also until my last
Mhm.
breath. It's all circumnavigated around being able to provide that clarity, because I do believe that pattern recognition is power, right? When you see your patterns, you can never unsee them. And then when you track them somatically, that's where you learn to behave differently. So it's a very powerful, I actually wrote a whole book on this, and it's broken down into 9 modules. And I want to say that I never ever go digging for wounds in sessions. People are totally welcome to come to me for a relaxation session. However, when I'm met with something real being expressed, I'm there at lightning speed to meet it and support it. And I also have a framework for the ongoing healing that can be done between sessions, because I am running a high touch container, which is highly personalized and attuned. It is not a blanketed framework for every single client. And for the people that really want to do deeper personal work, I tell them that the immersion sessions are appropriate for once a month. And the modules that I run people through are, you're doing one module every 2 weeks, and it's for all the things that I listed with, self-abandonment and standards for who gets to access you in your life, and emotional literacy and discernment, and all this stuff is directly tied to what we're holding emotionally. And until we understand it, it will keep repeating itself. So this is the way out, is to go in.
Wow. Yeah. And I did notice on your website that you offer a bunch of different services, but one of them is the intensive immersion. Is that what it's?
So the somatic tantra immersion is the work that I do. There are other sessions on the website, because there are 3 other healers on my website, and some of them we offer different, we have different certifications, we offer different work, but I think what binds us together is the ethical standards of how we're holding the containers. But my sessions, I allow space for people to express themselves to whatever extent they want in the opening conversation. And then I leave at least, all my sessions run 3 to 4 hours, sometimes 5 for repeating clients, but I feel like most people can only really stay present for 3 to 4 hours. And then after I do the body work on them, I have a vibroacoustic sound table, which is an FDA approved class 1 medical device. And at the end of the session, it's like people become very open and they can walk out the door extremely ungrounded. So the sound bed functions to bring them back down where there's some closure for the container. And so I put them under a weighted blanket with a weighted eye mask, and it runs binaural frequencies through 200 amps of subwoofers embedded in the table, and it shakes their nervous system out to where they can fully let go. And it's really a tool that mimics what meditation is designed to do for us, which is to bring you to a place where you're not grabbing onto every thought and letting it take you to wherever. You're being present with your breath. And the sound table makes this a very easy training for. This is where you go when you learn how to properly meditate. And I have a little bit of time at the end of the session for them to, I always have snacks and water and stuff, and for them to ask me any further questions. And it's a full arc. It's not just opening and then sending somebody out the door. There also needs to be closing and integration. So I offer aftercare where, and it's optional. They don't have to take it, but if they want to talk to me the next day on the phone, and I just ask them how they're doing, and there's homework if they want it. So it's, we go as deep as people want to go. If they just want to relax, they don't want to talk much, that's fine. But if they want to go all the way into their deepest stuff, I'm totally there for it either way. And I love it. Either way, I'm happy.
Yeah. What an amazing experience. As we wrap up, Crystal, is there anything that we haven't talked about that you would like our listeners to know?
Yes, a few things. So I welcome the neurodivergent folk. I also do a lot of work with couples, and I am currently in Terry Reel's relational life therapy training, which is a great addition to the practice, especially helping couples work through things like infidelity or just high conflict or distance from one another. And if you are thinking about doing a somatic session or a Tantra session and you have no idea what to expect, you do not need to come to me knowing anything. You just need to come to me as you are, and everything will be explained to you. Nothing is ever done without consent. And I do have a screening process. And there's always a preliminary phone call before sessions where, after the verification is complete, they are welcome to ask me any questions and concerns, and then we do the scheduling together. So I want them to have a chance to talk to me before meeting me, because the work starts the moment we get on the phone. That's where their nervous system is learning to move from anxiety into excitement about coming into the session. I people coming in anxious because they've never talked to me before and don't know what to expect.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much for being here, Crystal. You're doing so many amazing things. And so your locations are mostly in California, and I saw there's one in Texas also.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, and so all of your website and all of your socials I'll put in the show notes so that people have access to them. But if people really want to connect with you and have questions, what is the fastest, easiest way to get in touch with you?
I have several ways that people can do this. So on the website, if somebody is maybe nervous about filling out the verification form, there is a connect with us on every single page. It's also on the header and the footer of the website. And then like I said, I always schedule a phone call. They're welcome to text any of the lines that are listed at the footer of the website. I can also be reached by email, and there is a link tree at the bottom of the website where you can see our presence on pretty much every social media platform. And so it's pretty much whatever is the most convenient way, and I will find a way to work with them and lead them to the door.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure getting to know you.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.